Her simple young woman, owner of a food truck, ignores a mysterious man in the line. What he did next transformed not only her business, but the course of her life forever. In a discreet corner of a busy street in Seattle, between the noise of buses and the hurried rhythm of pedestrians, there was a modest food truck called Rise and Shine. The warm colors of its paint contrasted with the gray asphalt of the cold Pacific Northwest mornings. It was there, in that spot forgotten by tourist routes and luxury apps, that Emily Reynolds built her livelihood and her world, with her own hands day after day, since her mother had passed away, leaving behind only a recipe notebook, a teenage brother, and an emotional debt with life. Emily wasn't the complaining type. She woke up before sunrise, adjusted her cap, organized the ingredients, and turned on the griddle with the precision of someone who knew that each sandwich sold was also a vote of confidence from someone who had chosen to stop there. She knew all the faces in the line: Mr. Wilson, the retired Navy veteran who always arrived wearing his cap; Rose, who sold flowers at the traffic light; and even a group of university students who, though broke, wouldn't give up their grilled bread with cheese and black coffee. On one of those ordinary mornings, a contrasting figure appeared. A tall man in a well-tailored suit, shoes that gleamed under the fine mist, and a gaze that seemed more tired than elegant. He observed the line unhurriedly, holding a cell phone he didn't check. When it was his turn to order, Emily gently interrupted him, pointing to the elderly man who came right behind. The last sandwich, she warned, already had an owner. The man didn't argue. He just nodded with a half-smile and stepped back. Emily wasn't impressed. She had seen well-dressed people behave much worse. She served the coffee and went on with her day. The next morning he returned. Same impeccable outfit, same curious silence. He ordered just a coffee. Emily found it strange but didn't comment. Throughout the week, he began to return every day, always at the same time, always with the same expression of someone who wasn't there just for the hot drink. Sometimes he stayed a bit after others had left, observing the movement or just the city breathing. Emily began to notice the details. He never took napkins, avoided calls, and seemed to recognize the smell of the griddle more than the names of the ingredients. Emily's brother, Tyler, 17 years old, noticed too. In a loose conversation, he commented to his sister that the man looked like someone who had known hunger. The phrase stayed in her head for days. The man seemed to carry something unresolved, an incomplete story in his deep eyes, and in the way he kept his hands in his pockets, as if he kept memories there that he didn't want to show. One afternoon, Emily was cleaning the counters when an elderly woman asked if it was true that the man who always had coffee there was the so-called Nathan Hayes. The name didn't sound strange to her, but it didn't cause alarm either. The customer showed an article on her phone. Nathan Hayes, founder of one of the largest tech companies in the United States, young billionaire, reclusive, discreet. The image in the report showed a man very similar to the one in her line. Though more rigid, more guarded. Emily wasn't sure, but something inside her began to suspect. In the following days, she paid even more attention. He arrived with another person once, a man with contained speech and firm posture, whom he introduced as his driver. But Emily noticed that the so-called driver had tattoos hidden under his shirt, and the posture of someone who was there more to protect than to drive. She began to mentally piece together a puzzle, but she didn't confront him. She preferred to observe. An especially cold morning brought more than wind. In the food truck's suggestion box, where compliments and requests for more meat pastries usually accumulated, there was a manila envelope. Inside, just one handwritten sentence: "You change someone's future." There was no signature. There was no context. But Emily felt a chill down her spine. She remembered an old scene from when she was still a teenager living in a humble neighborhood in Portland. She remembered a lonely boy at the door of the shelter, with dirty clothes and a desperate look. She remembered a shared sandwich and a napkin hastily scribbled with the phrase, "You still have a future." Could it be? The doubt was immediate, but she preferred not to go further. The past sometimes knew how to be a treacherous place. The following week, a storm broke over Seattle. The food truck's awning almost flew away. Emily alone tried to save what she could. Between flying saucers and escaping trays, she felt someone cover her with a large, silent umbrella. It was him, Nathan. He helped close everything without saying much. The two stayed under the canvas, breathless, soaked. He looked at her as if he wanted to say something he had long kept, but he didn't say it. He just thanked her and left. A few days later, everything changed. A black car stopped in front of the food truck. People got out with cameras, microphones, questions. The press had discovered. Nathan Hayes, the billionaire CEO, had been having coffee every day at a neighborhood food truck. They wanted to know why. They wanted headlines, statements, scandals. Emily froze. The shock wasn't from the name, but from the omission. She felt as if she had been used, exposed. The bond that was growing there now seemed stained by mistrust. She closed the food truck indefinitely. She needed to think. Nathan didn't appear in the following days. No message, no attempt at explanation. Emily tried to continue with her routine at home, but Tyler noticed the absence of the smell of bread on the griddle. She began to consider selling the truck. She announced it. But she didn't press publish. When the city already seemed to have forgotten the scandal, Nathan reappeared. No team, no press. Wrinkled suit, unshaven. He brought in his hands a folder with a plan. Expansion of Rise and Shine, franchises, new location, initial investment. At the bottom of the contract, the most important clause, Emily would have 51% of the company. He also brought something more, an old steel spoon with the name of Emily's grandmother engraved. It was the spoon used in the first food truck, lost in a renovation. Nathan had had it restored. Without decorative words, without speeches, he delivered it with the trembling hands of someone who no longer wanted to hide anything. Emily's decision didn't come at the same moment. But something inside her, deep down, recognized the shelter boy. Not by the name nor by the money, but by the gesture. She who believed in hard work also believed in new beginnings. And maybe, just maybe, there was still a future for both. Not for what they had, but for what they reminded each other to be. The urban landscape of Seattle, with its iconic Space Needle piercing through the morning fog, formed the backdrop to Emily Reynolds' daily struggle. The Rise and Shine food truck, painted in sunny yellow and warm orange, stood as a defiant splash of color against the city's notorious gray skies. At 32, Emily had learned to measure her life not in years but in small victories. The perfect crisp edge on her grilled cheese sandwiches, the extra dollar tip from a satisfied customer, the rare mornings when her 17-year-old brother Tyler didn't oversleep his alarm. "Order up, Mr. Wilson," Emily called out, sliding a paper-wrapped sandwich across the counter to the elderly man who had been her first customer when she opened 3 years ago. His Navy veteran cap, faded but meticulously clean, was as much a part of her morning routine as brewing the first pot of coffee before dawn. "You're an angel." "Emily," he replied, his weathered hands accepting the sandwich with reverence. "My Martha used to make them just like this." Emily smiled, knowing that Martha had been gone for 8 years, and that Mr. Wilson lived alone in a small apartment 6 blocks away. These connections, these human threads that tied her food truck to the fabric of the neighborhood, were what kept Emily going through the cold Seattle winters, and the financial uncertainty that came with small business ownership. Tyler appeared at the service window, his school backpack slung over one shoulder. "Hey, sis. Need help with the lunch rush later? Don't you have that science project due tomorrow?" Emily raised an eyebrow while simultaneously pouring coffee for a regular customer. Tyler's shoulders slumped slightly. "I'm almost done with it. Just thought you might need an extra hand since Jessie called in sick yesterday, too." Emily softened. Tyler had grown up too fast after their mother's passing 4 years ago. At 17, he shouldered more responsibility than most of his peers, helping at the food truck whenever he could, while maintaining honor roll status. The weight of being his sole guardian pressed on Emily daily, her constant reminder that she couldn't afford to fail. "Tell you what," she compromised, "finish your project, and if you still have time, swing by after school. But school comes first, buddy. Always." The morning rush ebbed and flowed, a rhythm Emily had memorized like a favorite song. By 10:30 a.m., the crowd thinned as office workers settled into their cubicles, and the early lunch seekers were still an hour away. Emily used this lull to prep for the midday surge, chopping onions with practiced efficiency when a shadow fell across her cutting board. She looked up to find a man she'd never seen before standing at her window. Tall, with dark hair flecked with premature silver at the temples, He wore a charcoal suit that screamed custom tailoring, but it was his eyes that caught Emily's attention, deep blue and carrying a weariness that seemed at odds with his polished exterior. "Good morning," she greeted, wiping her hands on her apron. "What can I get for you?" He studied the simple menu board above her head, taking his time as if contemplating a fine wine list rather than a selection of breakfast sandwiches and coffee options. "Just a black coffee, please." His voice had a quiet authority that made Emily wonder if he was used to being obeyed. As she poured his coffee, she noticed his hands, strong with a callus on his right middle finger. A writer, perhaps, or someone who still signed physical documents in an increasingly digital world. "$3.50, she said, sliding the cup toward him. He handed her a $10 bill. "Keep the change." As the man turned to leave, Emily spotted Mr. Carson, an elderly regular who struggled with arthritis, making his slow way to the truck. "Wait," Emily called to the suited man. "I'm sorry, but that's my last blueberry muffin for today, and Mr. Carson always gets one. Would you mind choosing something else?" The man turned back, surprised. For a moment, Emily thought she'd made a mistake. People with money often didn't like being denied, even something as trivial as a muffin. But instead, his face softened almost imperceptibly. "Of course," he said, nodding respectfully. "No problem at all." Emily watched as he stepped aside for the elderly man, even helping him steady his cane against the food truck's counter. The small act of kindness contradicted the corporate armor he wore, and Emily found herself wondering about the story behind those tired eyes. The next day, to her surprise, the man returned. Same time, same immaculate suit, though today's was navy blue instead of charcoal. Again, he ordered only black coffee, and again he left a generous tip. By the third day, Emily began to wonder if he worked nearby, perhaps at one of the tech companies that had transformed Seattle's landscape and economy over the past decade. On the fourth day, he arrived during a momentary lull, and Emily found herself with the unusual luxury of time to chat. "You must work around here," she ventured, as she handed him his usual coffee. He took a sip before answering. "Not far. I've been trying different coffee places in the area." "And you keep coming back here?" Emily raised an eyebrow. "There's a fancy artisanal coffee shop with single-origin beans just 2 blocks over." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Their coffee costs twice as much and has half the soul." He glanced around at her modest setup. Sometimes authenticity matters more than presentation. The comment lingered in Emily's mind long after he'd left. There was something about the man that didn't quite fit, like a puzzle piece that resembled the right shape, but wouldn't snap properly into place. That evening, as Emily and Tyler ate dinner in their small apartment above a laundromat, she mentioned the mysterious customer. "Suit guy came back again today," she said, passing Tyler the bowl of pasta. "The one who looks like he should be having lunch at the Metropolitan Grill instead of standing in the rain at a food truck." Tyler asked through a mouthful of spaghetti. Emily nodded. "There's something about him." "Tyler, he reminds me of someone, but I can't place who." Tyler twirled pasta thoughtfully. "You know who he reminds me of? Those kids who used to come to the shelter when we volunteered with Mum. The ones who never asked for seconds, even when they were still hungry." Emily stared at her brother, struck by the accuracy of his observation. "You're right. He has that same, I don't know, guardedness, like he's calculating how much of himself he can safely show. Maybe he's famous or something," Tyler suggested, reaching for his phone. "Like trying to stay low-key? In a food truck line in the rain. There are easier ways to be inconspicuous in Seattle." The next morning brought torrential rain, the kind that turned Seattle streets into temporary rivers and sent tourists scurrying for cover. Emily expected business to be slow, but surprisingly, her regulars appeared one by one, collars turned up against the deluge, determined to maintain their routines despite the weather. The suit man, Emily had started thinking of him as Blue Eyes, arrived at his usual time, today carrying a large black umbrella. He ordered his coffee, and then instead of leaving immediately as he typically did, he lingered by the side of the truck, ostensibly taking shelter from the downpour. Emily noticed him observing her interactions with customers, the way she remembered Mr. Wilson liked his coffee with just a splash of cream, how she always included an extra napkin for Ms. Rodriguez, who had rheumatoid arthritis, and sometimes struggled with packaging. He seemed to be studying her, and the realization made Emily self-conscious and slightly uneasy. When the morning crowd dispersed, he approached the window again. "You know all of them, don't you?" he asked without preamble. "Their names, their stories." Emily shrugged, wiping down her counter. "Most of them have been coming since I opened. Some even before that, when my mom ran this truck. Your mother taught you the business?" His question seemed genuinely interested rather than merely polite. Emily felt a familiar pang at the mention of her mother. "She taught me everything. Cooking, running a business, treating people right." She hesitated before adding, "She passed away 4 years ago, cancer." "I'm sorry," he said, and the simple words carried a weight of sincerity that surprised Emily. "Thanks. Some days it feels like yesterday, other days like another lifetime." Emily didn't know why she was sharing this with a stranger. Something about his steady gaze made her feel he might understand loss in a way many couldn't. "And now you run this by yourself?" "Me and my brother Tyler when he's not in school. He's 17, smart as a whip, and headed to college next year if I have anything to say about it." Pride colored Emily's voice. "He's already got interest from several schools for engineering scholarships." The man nodded thoughtfully. "You've done well by him." "I've tried," Emily admitted. "Some days I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water, but—" She caught herself, suddenly aware she was oversharing with a customer she barely knew. "Sorry, I don't usually talk so much. Don't apologize. It's refreshing to hear someone speak honestly." He glanced at his watch, an understated but undoubtedly expensive timepiece. "I should get going." As he turned to leave, Emily called after him, "You know, I don't even know your name." He paused, umbrella poised to open. For a moment, he seemed to be weighing something in his mind. "Nathan," he said finally. "Nathan Hayes." The name tickled something in Emily's memory. But before she could place it, Nathan had disappeared into the rain-soaked Seattle morning, leaving Emily with the strange feeling that she had just experienced something significant, though she couldn't have explained why. Later that afternoon, as Emily was preparing to close for the day, a well-dressed woman in her 60s approached the truck. Her silver hair was styled in an elegant bob, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being respected. "Are you Emily Reynolds?" the woman asked, her tone friendly but direct. "Yes?" "That's me," Emily replied, wondering if this was a health inspector or perhaps a representative from one of the nearby office buildings. "I'm Margaret Townsend." The woman extended a manicured hand. "I was hoping to catch you before you closed. I've heard wonderful things about your food truck." Emily shook her hand, still puzzled. "Thank you." "From whom, if you don't mind my asking?" Margaret smiled enigmatically. "Let's just say a mutual acquaintance speaks highly of your coffee and your character." She glanced around the small truck appreciatively. "You've created something special here. A true neighborhood institution." "I try my best," Emily said modestly, increasingly curious about this elegant stranger. "I wonder," Margaret continued, "have you ever considered expanding? Perhaps opening a permanent location?" "Every small business owner dreams of growing," Emily admitted. "But the reality is I'm barely breaking even some months. Expansion isn't in the cards right now." Margaret nodded understandingly. "Dreams require capital, and capital is hard to come by for small businesses, especially women-owned ones." She reached into her designer purse and extracted a business card, which she handed to Emily. "I'm on the board of a foundation that provides grants to promising entrepreneurs. I think you might be exactly the kind of business owner we're looking to support." Emily examined the card. The Hayes Foundation for Community Enterprise. The logo was simple but elegant, a stylized rising sun, not unlike the one painted on her own food truck. Something clicked in Emily's mind. "Hayes," she repeated, "as in Nathan Hayes." A knowing smile spread across Margaret's face. "So you've met him?" "I thought you might have." "He comes by for coffee," Emily said carefully, suddenly feeling out of her depth. "Is he—" "Important." Margaret's laugh was warm and genuine. "That depends entirely on who you ask. To Wall Street, yes. To Seattle's tech industry, absolutely. To himself?" She shrugged elegantly. "Nathan has always valued substance over status. It doesn't surprise me in the least that he found his way to your food truck." Emily's mind was racing. Who is he exactly? "Google him when you get home," Margaret suggested with a wink. "And think about the grant. Applications are due next month. She gestured to the information on the back of the card. We could use more businesses with heart in this city. As Margaret walked away, Emily stood frozen, the business card clutched in her hand like a winning lottery ticket. She wasn't sure she'd actually validate it. That evening, after closing up the truck and returning to the apartment, Emily's fingers hovered over her laptop keyboard before finally typing Nathan Hayes, Seattle. The search results flooded her screen, and Emily's jaw dropped. Nathan Hayes, founder and CEO of Horizon Technologies, one of the most innovative software companies in the country. The same Nathan Hayes who had made Forbes' 30 Under 30 list 7 years ago and had since grown his company into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. The same Nathan Hayes who was known for his philanthropy almost as much as his business acumen, but who rarely gave interviews and was notorious for valuing his privacy. Holy crap, Emily whispered to herself. Scrolling through images that confirmed her coffee customer was indeed the tech wunderkind. Why on earth is a billionaire coming to my food truck every day for mediocre coffee? Tyler peered over her shoulder at the screen. Wait, is that your mysterious suit guy? He's loaded. He whistled low. Maybe he's looking to invest in small businesses or something. Or maybe he just likes the coffee, Emily murmured, though she didn't believe it for a second. There had to be more to the story. The next morning, Emily found herself watching the street with unusual alertness, half expecting Nathan not to show up now that she knew who he was. But at precisely 10:30 a.m. he appeared, today in a light grey suit that probably cost more than 3 months of Emily's rent. As she handed him his coffee, Emily studied his face more carefully. In the business photos online, he looked confident, even formidable. In person, there was a vulnerability to him that the cameras hadn't captured. I met Margaret Townsend yesterday, Emily said without preamble. She mentioned your foundation. If Nathan was surprised by her directness, he didn't show it. He simply nodded. Margaret has an eye for potential. She rarely makes mistakes in her assessments. Why didn't you tell me who you are? Nathan's eyes met hers steadily. Would it have mattered? Would you have treated me differently? Emily considered this. Probably. Most people would. That's why I didn't say anything. He took a sip of his coffee. Do you know how rare it is for someone like me to be treated like a normal person? To be told they can't have the last blueberry muffin because it's reserved for someone else? A genuine smile broke through his reserve. It was refreshing. Emily wasn't entirely convinced. So you've been coming here incognito for, what, the authentic experience? Initially, yes, Nathan admitted. I was scouting locations in this neighborhood for a new office building and spotted your truck. Something about it, the colors, the name, caught my attention. He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. But I kept coming back because there's something about this place that feels familiar, in a good way. Before Emily could press him further, her phone rang. Tyler's school. Her heart dropped. The school only called during the day if something was wrong. Excuse me, she said to Nathan, answering quickly. Hello? Yes, this is Emily Reynolds. As she listened to the school administrator explain that Tyler had passed out during gym class and was now in the nurse's office with a high fever, Emily felt the blood drain from her face. With her mother gone and no other family nearby, every minor emergency felt like a potential catastrophe. I'll be right there, she promised, ending the call and turning to the small crowd of waiting customers. I'm so sorry, but I have to close immediately. Family emergency. The regulars, understanding as always, dispersed with well wishes. Emily frantically began shutting down equipment, her mind racing ahead to logistics. She'd need to find someone to cover the truck tomorrow if Tyler was seriously ill. They couldn't afford to lose even a day's income. And the last of her emergency savings had gone to repair the truck's refrigeration unit just last month. Is everything all right? Nathan asked, still standing at the window. My brother's sick at school. I need to go get him, but I also need to secure everything here and my car's in the shop until tomorrow, so I'll have to call a rideshare and... She stopped herself, taking a deep breath. Sorry, I'll figure it out. Nathan pulled out his phone. I have a car waiting around the corner. Let me help you close up and I'll drive you to the school. Emily hesitated, her independence warring with practicality. I couldn't ask you to... You didn't ask. I offered, Nathan said simply. That's how community works, isn't it? The word community struck Emily powerfully. Despite his wealth and status, Nathan Hayes had somehow recognized what the Rise and Shine truly was. Not just a food truck, but a small community hub, a place where people looked out for each other. And now, whether by coincidence or some greater design, he had become part of that community too. Okay, Emily nodded, handing him a stack of containers to secure. Thank you. As they worked side by side to close the truck, Emily couldn't help but wonder what other surprises Nathan Hayes might bring into her carefully constructed world, and whether those surprises would strengthen the foundation she'd built, or cause it to crumble beneath her. A week had passed since the day Nathan Hayes had driven Emily to Tyler's school and subsequently waited with them at the urgent care clinic for 3 hours. Tyler's illness had turned out to be nothing more serious than a seasonal flu, but the experience had shifted something in Emily's perception of the billionaire entrepreneur. The man who had patiently flipped through outdated magazines in a cramped waiting room, who had insisted on picking up Tyler's prescription on their way home, and who had tactfully arranged for grocery delivery to their apartment without making Emily feel like a charity case. This was not the tech mogul the business magazines portrayed. Nathan had continued his daily visits to Rise and Shine, but the dynamic had changed. The careful distance Emily had maintained dissolved into something more genuine. They talked about Seattle's growth, about Tyler's college aspirations, about the challenges of small business ownership. Nathan never flaunted his wealth or expertise, but occasionally offered subtle suggestions that Emily recognized as valuable business insights. On a particularly busy Tuesday, Emily looked up from the grill to find Nathan at the window, but today he wasn't alone. A man stood beside him, broad-shouldered with close-cropped hair and the hyper-vigilant posture that Emily associated with security personnel. "Emily, this is Michael," Nathan introduced. "He works with me." Michael nodded politely but remained silent, his eyes constantly scanning the surroundings. "He's not really your driver, is he?" Emily asked quietly when Michael stepped away to take a phone call. Nathan's eyebrow arched in surprise. "What makes you say that?" "The way he stands. The way he watches everything." Emily shrugged. "My mom dated a police officer for a while. Michael has the same look." A smile tugged at Nathan's lips. "You're observant. Michael is technically my head of security, though he prefers less conspicuous titles when we're in public." "Do billionaires really need security for coffee runs?" Emily teased, though she was genuinely curious. "More than you might think," Nathan replied, a shadow crossing his features. "Success makes you visible in ways that aren't always comfortable or safe." Emily considered this as she worked, stealing glances at Nathan and Michael conversing quietly several feet away from the truck. There were layers to Nathan Hayes that she was only beginning to understand: the public persona, the private man, and perhaps something else entirely that he kept carefully guarded. Later that afternoon, during the post-lunch lull, Emily was surprised to find a manila envelope in her suggestion box. Inside was a folded sheet of high-quality stationery containing a single handwritten sentence: "You changed someone's future." The handwriting was precise and formal, not Nathan's. She instinctively knew, but the message sent a chill through her nonetheless. It echoed too closely a memory Emily had kept buried for years, a fragment of her life before Seattle, before the food truck, before she became Tyler's guardian. That evening, after Tyler had gone to bed, Emily sat at their small kitchen table and allowed herself to remember Portland, the homeless shelter where she and her mother had volunteered every Sunday, serving meals to those in need. Emily had been 15 then, already showing the culinary talent that would later become her livelihood. She remembered one boy in particular, skinny, with haunted eyes and clothes that had clearly been donated but didn't quite fit. He couldn't have been more than 12. Week after week he would come alone, never speaking, just accepting whatever food was offered, with a barely perceptible nod of thanks. One Sunday, the boy hadn't appeared in the serving line. Emily had found him outside the shelter, huddled against the wall, tears streaming silently down his face. He'd been turned away for arriving after hours, a new volunteer enforcing rules too rigidly. Emily had sat beside him, offering half her own lunch sandwich and a napkin to dry his tears. "It's just one day," she'd told him. "You can come back tomorrow. You still have a future." She'd written the last part on another napkin and given it to him, an impromptu gesture of teenage optimism that she'd almost forgotten until the note in the suggestion box had resurrected the memory. Could it be? Emily dismissed the thought almost immediately. The coincidence would be too extreme, the world too impossibly small. And yet, Nathan's age would be right. The timeline could fit. "You're being ridiculous," Emily muttered to herself, forcing the memory back into its box. Successful people like Nathan Hayes didn't emerge from backgrounds of homelessness and hunger, did they? The next morning brought one of Seattle's infamous thunderstorms, the kind that transformed the city into a dramatic landscape of metallic skies and sudden lightning. Emily had barely secured the food truck's awning when the downpour began in earnest, sheets of rain creating an almost opaque curtain around her small domain. Business was predictably slow, with only the most determined regulars venturing out. By mid-morning, Emily found herself alone in the truck, watching raindrops race down the serving window while she caught up on bookkeeping, a task she typically tackled during these weather-induced lulls. The numbers weren't encouraging. Despite the food truck's popularity, rising food costs and increasing competition from new establishments in the rapidly gentrifying neighborhood had begun to erode Emily's already thin profit margins. She was cutting it close each month, the financial tightrope becoming increasingly precarious as Tyler's college expenses loomed on the horizon. Emily was so absorbed in her calculations that she didn't notice the figure approaching until a knock on the window startled her. Nathan stood there, completely drenched despite his umbrella, which had clearly surrendered to the wind's assault. "You're soaked," Emily exclaimed, opening the service window wider. "Get in here before you catch pneumonia." Nathan hesitated, then moved around to the truck's side door that Emily rarely unlocked during business hours. She let him in, the small space suddenly feeling much smaller with his tall frame occupying a significant portion of it. "Sorry about this," Nathan said, running a hand through his wet hair. "I wasn't planning to intrude on your workspace." "Don't worry about it," Emily replied, handing him a clean towel. "Though I have to ask, what kind of billionaire doesn't have a driver with a car on rainy days?" Nathan's laugh was unexpected and genuine. The kind who told his security team to take the morning off and then underestimated Seattle weather. As he dried his face, Emily noticed a thin scar along his jawline, nearly invisible unless you were standing as close as she was now. It was the kind of mark that came from violence, not accident, another piece of the puzzle that was Nathan Hayes. A sudden gust of wind rocked the truck, and outside, the awning Emily had secured earlier tore free, flapping dangerously in the gale. "Damn it," Emily muttered, reaching for her rain jacket. "That's the second time this month. I can't afford to replace it again." Without hesitation, Nathan was out the door before she could stop him. Emily watched through the window as he battled the elements, securing the awning with surprising competence for someone who probably had maintenance staff for every property he owned. When he returned, even more thoroughly drenched than before, there was something different in his eyes, a spark of exhilaration that transformed his usually composed demeanor. "Thank you," Emily said, genuinely impressed. "You didn't have to do that. I wanted to." Nathan accepted a fresh towel, his voice softer now. "It felt good to fix something with my own hands for once." The storm continued its assault on Seattle, effectively trapping them together in the small food truck. The unusual circumstance created an intimacy neither had anticipated, and conversation flowed more easily than it ever had during Nathan's brief visits for coffee. Emily found herself sharing stories of her mother's courage during her illness, of the difficult decision to leave Portland for a fresh start in Seattle, of her determination to ensure Tyler had opportunities she'd never had. Nathan listened with genuine interest, asking questions that revealed his own understanding of loss and reinvention. "Your brother is lucky to have you," he said when Emily described how she'd converted their tiny apartment's closet into a study space for Tyler. "Not everyone has someone who believes in them so completely." "Did you?" Emily asked before she could reconsider the personal nature of the question. "Have someone who believed in you, I mean." Nathan's expression grew distant, eventually. Not at first. He seemed about to elaborate when his phone buzzed. The spell broken, he checked the screen and sighed. "I need to take this. Business crisis. He stepped outside despite the continuing rain, seeking privacy for his call. Emily watched through the window as his entire demeanor transformed, shoulders squaring, voice taking on an authority she could sense even if she couldn't hear his words. This was CEO Nathan Hayes, not the man who had just helped her save her awning. When he returned, the wall was back up. "I'm sorry, Emily, but I need to go. Thank you for the shelter and conversation." "Any time," she replied, trying to mask her disappointment at the abrupt shift. "That's what community is for, right?" A ghost of a smile acknowledged her deliberate echo of his earlier sentiment. "Right." He hesitated at the door. "Emily, Whatever he had been about to say remained unspoken as another call came through. "I have to take this. See you tomorrow." But Emily didn't see Nathan the next day or the day after. For the first time since he'd appeared at her window, his morning ritual of black coffee was broken. She told herself it didn't matter. He was a busy executive with a multinational company to run, not actually a friend or regular part of her life. The weekend arrived with still no sign of Nathan. Emily was serving the Saturday morning crowd when she noticed a black SUV with tinted windows parked across the street. The vehicle remained there for hours, its presence increasingly obvious as the day progressed. By closing time, Emily's curiosity had turned to unease. As she was locking up the truck, Michael appeared beside her, seemingly materializing from nowhere. "Ms. Reynolds," he greeted her formally. "Mr. Hayes would like to speak with you if you have time." Emily glanced at the SUV. "Is he in there? Why hasn't he come himself?" Michael's expression remained neutral. "There have been some developments. Mr. Hayes thought it best to be discreet." Before Emily could respond, the SUV's door opened and Nathan emerged. Even from a distance, Emily could see the tension in his posture, the strain around his eyes. Something had happened, something significant. As Nathan approached, Emily noticed a newspaper tucked under his arm. Without a word, he handed it to her. The business section featured a prominent article with the headline, "Tech Billionaire Nathan Hayes' Secret Life." Below was a photo clearly taken with a telephoto lens, Nathan entering Emily's food truck during the storm. "I'm so sorry," Nathan said quietly. "This was never supposed to happen." Emily skimmed the article, her stomach tightening at phrases like mysterious relationship and reclusive CEO's hidden connection. The piece stopped just short of outright romantic speculation. But the insinuation was clear enough. "They've been calling the truck all day," Nathan continued. "Reporters, bloggers, even some of my competitors fishing for information. Michael has been monitoring the situation." "That's why you haven't come by," Emily realized. "You were trying to protect me from this." Nathan nodded grimly. "The press can be relentless when they smell a story. I should know. I've been dodging them for years." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Emily now recognized as a sign of his frustration. "The problem is now they've dragged you into it. They'll dig into your life, your business, your past. They'll spin whatever they find into whatever narrative sells the most clicks." "Why would anyone care about your coffee habits?" Emily asked, bewildered by the media's interest in something so mundane. "Because I rarely establish patterns. Because I almost never frequent the same place repeatedly without a business reason. Because—" he broke off, choosing his words carefully. "Because I've cultivated a certain image that makes this behavior seem out of character." Emily felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "So what now?" "I've prepared a statement that my PR team will release on Monday. It explains that I was conducting informal market research for potential investment in local food businesses. Purely professional interest." Nathan's eyes held a question, seeking her approval of this sanitized version of their connection. Something inside Emily rebelled at the reduction of their emerging friendship, or whatever it was, to a sterile business transaction. But she understood the necessity. She had Tyler to consider, and unwanted publicity could hurt Rise and Shine as much as help it. "That makes sense," she agreed quietly. "I should probably lay low for a while too." "It might be best," Nathan admitted, and she could see how much it cost him to say it. "Just until the news cycle moves on to something else." Emily nodded, already mentally calculating how closing temporarily would affect her finances. As if reading her thoughts, Nathan spoke again. "I want to compensate you for any business you lose because of this. It's my responsibility." Pride flared in Emily's chest. "I don't want your money, Nathan." It's not charity, he insisted. Gert's making right something that's my fault. Is it your fault? Emily challenged. Did you ask to be photographed? Did you do anything wrong by coming to my food truck? Nathan seemed taken aback by her directness. No, but then don't apologize for it. Emily squared her shoulders. I'll handle my business, you handle yours. If anyone asks, I'll confirm your story about market research. As they stood there on the darkening street, an invisible line seemed to have been drawn between them, one that neither was quite ready to cross, yet neither wanted to acknowledge. The easy camaraderie of the storm-bound food truck felt like a distant memory. I should go, Nathan said finally. Michael will make sure you get home safely. Emily wanted to object, to insist she didn't need protection or assistance, but the weight of the newspaper in her hands was evidence enough that her normal life had been temporarily suspended. Thank you, she said instead, the words feeling inadequate for the complexity of emotions swirling between them. As Nathan turned to leave, Emily called after him, an echo of their first real conversation. Nathan, why me? Why my food truck? Out of all the places in Seattle you could get coffee, why keep coming back to Rise and Shine? He paused, his back still to her, shoulders tense beneath his impeccable suit. For a moment Emily thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was so low she had to strain to hear it. Because sometimes to move forward, you need to remember where you came from. Before she could ask what he meant, Nathan was gone, disappearing into the waiting SUV, leaving Emily with more questions than answers, and the unsettling feeling that whatever connection they had formed was now in jeopardy, not just from outside forces, but from the secrets that still lay unspoken between them. The impact of the newspaper article was swift and far-reaching. By Sunday morning, Emily's phone was ringing constantly with calls from numbers she didn't recognize. Her email inbox filled with interview requests from local news outlets, food bloggers, and even a producer from a national morning show. The food truck's social media accounts, previously averaging a modest 20 to 30 interactions per post, suddenly exploded with follows, comments, and private messages, some supportive, others invasive and speculative. Emily spent the day in a state of stunned disbelief, alternating between silencing her phone and obsessively checking for updates on the situation. Tyler, ever protective, appointed himself her unofficial press secretary, screening calls and responding to the more benign social media comments with professional courtesy. This is crazy, Emily muttered, as they sat at their kitchen table Sunday evening. Takeout containers from a nearby Thai restaurant between them, a rare indulgence justified by the extraordinary circumstances. I've run that truck for 3 years, making the same food every day, and suddenly people care because a billionaire drinks my coffee. Not just any billionaire, Tyler pointed out, scrolling through his phone. According to this profile, Nathan Hayes is the enigmatic wunderkind of the Pacific Northwest tech scene, as famous for his revolutionary software as for his intensely private nature and selective philanthropy. He looked up with a grin. Did you know he's never been officially linked romantically to anyone? The internet is having a field day speculating about you two. Emily nearly choked on her pad thai. There is no us two. He's a customer who happens to be interesting to talk to. Tyler's eyebrow arched skeptically. A customer who drives you to the urgent care when I'm sick. Who helps you save your awning during a storm? Who shows up with his security detail to warn you about press attention? That's just basic human decency, Emily insisted, though she knew her brother had a point. Whatever was developing between her and Nathan defied simple categorization. Look, Tyler said more seriously, setting down his phone. I'm not saying you're secretly dating the guy, but something's there, Em. And whatever it is, it's now public interest, whether you like it or not. Emily sighed deeply. What should I do? Close the truck for a while? Tyler considered this. That might just feed the speculation, but opening as usual might turn your food truck into a circus. He drummed his fingers on the table, thinking. What about a middle ground? Limited hours, maybe? Or takeout only, no lingering customers? I can't afford to cut back hours, Emily admitted. Even with our regular business, we're just staying afloat. Tyler, your college deposits are due soon, and... Don't worry about that, Tyler interrupted firmly. I've got scholarship applications out. We'll figure it out. Emily reached across the table to squeeze her brother's hand, a surge of pride momentarily displacing her anxiety. Tyler had grown into a remarkably resilient young man, shouldering burdens no teenager should have to carry without complaint. Whatever mistakes Emily might have made as his guardian, she'd somehow managed to raise a kind, resourceful human being. Okay, she decided. Tomorrow we open as usual. Normal hours, normal menu. If reporters show up, we tell them the truth. Nathan Hayes is a regular customer, nothing more. This will blow over. Monday morning dawned clear and cool, a perfect Seattle autumn day. Emily arrived at the food truck an hour earlier than usual, hoping to prepare in peace before the potential media storm. To her relief, the street was empty save for Mr. Wilson, who was already waiting patiently for his breakfast sandwich, seemingly oblivious to the weekend's developments. "Morning." "Mr. Wilson," Emily greeted him, unlocking the truck. "You're early today." "Thought you might need a friendly face," he replied with a knowing look. "Saw that article about you and the rich fella. Bunch of nonsense if you ask me. Man can't even get a decent cup of coffee without the papers making a fuss." Emily smiled gratefully as she fired up the grill. "You're a good man, Mr. Wilson." The first hour of business proceeded with surprising normalcy. Emily's regulars arrived at their usual times, ordered their usual items, and while a few made teasing comments about her famous customer, most simply expressed concern for how she was handling the unwanted attention. It was just past 9 when the first news van appeared, parking conspicuously across the street. A reporter and cameraman emerged, the former checking her reflection in a compact mirror before approaching the food truck with a practiced smile. "Emily Reynolds? I'm Stephanie Chen from Channel 7 News. We'd love to get your reaction to your relationship with Nathan Hayes going public." Emily took a deep breath, mentally rehearsing the script she and Tyler had practiced. "Mr. Hayes is a customer who appreciates good coffee and authentic food. That's the extent of our relationship. Now, would you like to order something? There are people waiting." Stephanie's smile didn't waver. "Sources close to Hayes Industries suggest he's been visiting your truck daily for weeks. That seems like more than a casual customer relationship." "I value all my regular customers," Emily replied evenly. "Now, if you're not ordering, I need to serve the people who are." The reporter opened her mouth to press further, but at that moment, a group of construction workers from a nearby site crowded around her, loudly placing complicated breakfast orders. Emily had never been so grateful for the morning rush. By noon, 3 more news crews had arrived, along with a handful of paparazzi hoping to catch Nathan making an appearance. The narrow street had become congested with vehicles and curious onlookers, disrupting traffic and drawing complaints from neighboring businesses. Emily was beginning to regret her decision to open as usual when Michael appeared at the window, his expression grim. "Ms. Reynolds," he greeted her formally. "Mr. Hayes sends his apologies for the disruption. He's arranged for additional security to maintain order here, but he wondered if you might consider closing early today." Emily wiped sweat from her brow, surveying the chaotic scene outside her truck. "Tell Mr. Hayes I appreciate his concern, but this is my livelihood. I can't afford to close early because of some gossip." Michael's professional demeanor softened slightly. "He anticipated you might say that." He handed her an envelope. "This is for you, private and confidential." Inside was a handwritten note on the now familiar high-quality stationery. "Emily, I'm sorry for the intrusion into your life. This attention is unwanted and unwarranted, and I take full responsibility for it. Please accept the enclosed as compensation for business disruption, not charity. You've worked too hard to have your success jeopardized by my presence. If you need anything at all, Michael can reach me any time." As beneath the note was a cashier's check for $50,000. Emily stared at the check, a complex mix of emotions washing over her. Gratitude, pride, indignation, and something else she couldn't quite name. The sum was life-changing for someone in her position, enough to cover Tyler's college expenses, repair the food truck, and provide a financial cushion she'd never had. Yet something about it felt wrong. Like Nathan was paying to extract himself from her life, to sanitize whatever connection had been forming between them. "Please tell Mr. Hayes I appreciate the gesture," Emily said carefully, folding the check and returning it to the envelope. "But I can't accept this." Michael appeared unsurprised. "He thought you might refuse. He asked me to tell you that the offer remains open, should you reconsider. After Michael left, the day continued its surreal progression. By mid-afternoon, the media presence had begun to thin, their attention spans predictably short in the absence of Nathan Hayes or any juicy revelations from Emily. A few determined reporters lingered, but the circus atmosphere had largely dissipated. Emily was beginning to believe her business-as-usual approach might work after all when a sleek black Audi pulled up directly in front of the food truck. The few remaining paparazzi immediately perked up, cameras at the ready. The woman who emerged from the car wasn't Nathan, but she commanded attention nonetheless. Tall and elegant in a tailored pantsuit, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a severe bun, she moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to immediate deference. Emily recognized her immediately from photos online. Victoria Hayes, Nathan's mother and chairperson of Hayes Industries Board of Directors. The older woman bypassed the small line at the truck, approaching the window with a direct gaze that reminded Emily forcefully of Nathan's intensity. "Ms. Reynolds," she stated rather than asked, "I believe we need to talk." The reporters had begun to edge closer, sensing a potential story. Victoria Hayes silenced them with a single imperious glance before turning back to Emily. "Perhaps somewhere more private." Emily hesitated, torn between curiosity and caution. "I can't close the truck right now." "Of course not," Victoria agreed smoothly. "What time do you finish today?" 6 o'clock. "I'll send a car for you at 6:15. It wasn't a request. We'll have dinner and discuss this situation like rational adults." Before Emily could formulate a response, Victoria had turned and walked back to her car. The brief interaction clearly concluded to her satisfaction. The remaining hours of Emily's workday passed in a blur of anxiety and speculation. What could Nathan's mother possibly want to discuss? Was she here to warn Emily away from her son, to offer a larger payoff than Nathan had? The scenarios Emily imagined ranged from mildly uncomfortable to utterly humiliating. At exactly 6:15, as Emily was securing the last of the equipment in her truck, a different black car, a Bentley this time, pulled up to the curb. The driver, a woman in her 50s with a kind face, stepped out and approached Emily. "Ms. Reynolds?" "Mrs. Hayes is waiting for you at Canlis. I'm here to drive you there." Canlis was one of Seattle's most exclusive restaurants, with a waiting list that stretched months and prices that could feed Emily and Tyler for a week. She glanced down at her work clothes, jeans, sneakers, and a Rise and Shine t-shirt, hardly appropriate attire for such an establishment. As if reading her thoughts, the driver smiled reassuringly. "Mrs. Hayes mentioned you'd be coming directly from work. She's arranged for a private dining room." The drive to the restaurant was silent, Emily's mind racing with possible outcomes of the impending conversation. The driver seemed to sense her nervousness, maintaining a respectful quiet rather than attempting small talk. Upon arrival, Emily was led directly to a secluded room overlooking Lake Union, where Victoria Hayes sat alone at a table set for two, a glass of red wine already in hand. She looked up as Emily entered, her expression unreadable. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Reynolds," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. "Please sit. Would you like wine? Or perhaps something stronger? You look like you could use it." "Wine is fine," Emily replied, taking the offered seat. "Thank you." Victoria signaled to a hovering server, who poured Emily a glass of what was undoubtedly an extremely expensive vintage. Once they were alone again, Victoria studied Emily with the same penetrating gaze her son possessed. "I'll come straight to the point," she said finally. "My son is a very private person. He values his anonymity, which has been compromised by his association with your establishment." Emily bristled at the slight hesitation before the word establishment, as if Victoria couldn't quite bring herself to acknowledge a food truck as a legitimate business. "I didn't ask for any of this attention," Emily pointed out. "Your son chose to visit my truck repeatedly." "Yes," Victoria agreed, swirling her wine thoughtfully. "That's what makes this situation so unusual. Nathan rarely deviates from his routines. He doesn't form attachments easily." She fixed Emily with a direct stare. "Which makes me wonder what it is about you that has captured his interest so thoroughly." Emily met the older woman's gaze steadily. "You'd have to ask him that." "I have. He claims it's merely your coffee and the authentic atmosphere of your business. But Nathan has never been a particularly skilled liar, especially to his mother. Victoria leaned forward slightly. "So I'll ask you directly, what is the nature of your relationship with my son?" "We're friendly," Emily said carefully. "He's a customer who became someone I enjoy talking to. That's all." Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched skeptically. "My son doesn't chat with people, Ms. Reynolds. He doesn't help food truck operators during storms. He doesn't drive them to urgent care clinics. And he certainly doesn't offer them $50,000 without expecting something in return." Emily's surprise must have shown on her face, because Victoria smiled thinly. "Yes, I know about the check you refused. Very principled of you." "It wasn't about principles," Emily said, surprising herself with her candor. "It was about dignity. I don't want to be someone's problem to solve." Something shifted in Victoria's expression, not quite approval, but perhaps a reluctant reassessment. "My son has worked very hard to build his company and his reputation," she said after a moment. "He has responsibilities to his shareholders, his employees, his family. Distractions can be costly." "I'm not a distraction," Emily stated firmly. "I'm a person running a business just like he is. Mine's smaller, but it matters just as much to me as Hayes Industries matters to him." Victoria studied her for a long moment, then set down her wine glass with a decisive movement. "Nathan was right about you. You're not easily intimidated. Should I be?" Emily asked. "Are you here to threaten me in some way?" A surprised laugh escaped Victoria. "Threaten you? No, Ms. Reynolds, I'm here to understand you." She leaned back in her chair, her posture relaxing slightly. "My son has been different since he started visiting your food truck, more engaged, less withdrawn. Whatever effect you're having on him isn't entirely unwelcome." The conversation shifted then, moving into less confrontational territory. Victoria asked about Emily's background, her business, her plans for the future. Her questions were precise and perceptive, reminding Emily again of Nathan's analytical mind. By the time dessert arrived, Emily had revised her opinion of Victoria Hayes. Beneath the intimidating exterior was a fiercely intelligent woman who had clearly faced her own battles in the male-dominated corporate world. She wasn't warm exactly, but she was fair, a quality Emily respected more than superficial charm. "I have a proposition for you," Victoria said as their plates were cleared. "The media attention will fade, but not if Nathan continues to visit your food truck regularly. I suggest a temporary cessation, say 2 weeks. Give the story time to die down. After that, if you and Nathan wish to continue your acquaintance, perhaps more discreet arrangements could be made." Emily considered this. The proposal was reasonable, and the 2-week timeline suggested Victoria wasn't trying to permanently remove her from Nathan's life. "That makes sense," she agreed. "Though I can't control whether Nathan stays away." "Leave that to me," Victoria said with a small smile. "My son may run a multi-billion-dollar company, but he still listens to his mother, occasionally." As the evening concluded, Victoria insisted on having her driver take Emily home. At the door of the restaurant, she paused, studying Emily with that penetrating gaze once more. "You're not what I expected," she admitted. "I can see why Nathan finds you refreshing." Emily wasn't sure if that was a compliment or merely an observation, but she nodded in acknowledgement. "For what it's worth," Victoria added, "Nathan doesn't open up to many people. Whatever you've awakened in him, whatever piece of himself he's rediscovered through knowing you, it may be uncomfortable for him, but I believe it's necessary. He's been hiding for too long." Before Emily could ask what she meant, Victoria had swept away to her waiting car, leaving Emily with the distinct impression that she had passed some sort of test, though what the consequences of that success might be remained to be seen. The following day, Emily opened Rise and Shine as usual, but the media presence had noticeably diminished. By the end of the week, only one persistent paparazzo remained, eventually giving up when it became clear that Nathan Hayes was not going to make an appearance. True to Victoria's prediction, the news cycle moved on, finding fresh scandals and controversies to obsess over. Emily's food truck returned to its normal rhythm, though she now had more first-time customers drawn by the recent publicity. Some were clearly disappointed to find only excellent food rather than glimpses of a billionaire. But enough stayed to become regulars that Emily's sales actually increased slightly. Nathan's absence, however, left a more noticeable void than Emily had anticipated. She found herself glancing up at 10:30 each morning, half expecting to see his tall figure approaching the window. Their conversations, she realized, had become a bright spot in her routine, a break from the transactional exchanges that dominated her workday. Tyler noticed her distraction one evening as they prepared dinner together. "Have you heard from him at all?" he asked, cutting directly to the heart of the matter. Emily shook her head. Radio silence. "I'm sure he's busy. Or his mom told him to stay away," Tyler suggested, his teenage bluntness cutting through Emily's attempt at nonchalance. "Actually, she suggested 2 weeks," Emily admitted, "to let things die down." Tyler calculated on his fingers. "That's up tomorrow." "Think he'll be back?" Emily shrugged, aiming for casual indifference. "Maybe. It's just coffee, Tyler. He can get that anywhere." "But he wants yours," her brother pointed out with the certainty of youth. "He'll be back." Emily wasn't so sure. The more distant she got from the situation, the more she wondered if Nathan's interest had been genuine or merely the temporary fascination of a man accustomed to moving in rarefied circles, slumming it with ordinary people for the novelty of the experience. Perhaps Victoria's dinner had been less about protecting Nathan's privacy and more about gracefully extracting him from an entanglement that had served its purpose. That night, Emily dreamed of Portland, the shelter, the boy with the haunted eyes, the shared sandwich. In the dream, the boy's face kept shifting, sometimes appearing as the child she remembered, sometimes morphing into Nathan's features. She woke feeling unsettled, the boundary between past and present suddenly permeable, in a way that left her questioning her own memories. The next morning, exactly 2 weeks after the media frenzy had begun, Emily approached the food truck with a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. The street was quiet, the early October sun casting long shadows across the pavement. No reporters, no cameras, no curious onlookers. Just another day in Seattle. She was setting up when she heard a tentative knock on the side door of the truck, not the service window where customers typically approached. Emily opened it to find Nathan standing there, dressed not in his usual impeccable suit, but in jeans and a simple grey sweater that made him look younger, more vulnerable. "Hi," he said simply. "Hi," Emily replied, her heart beating a ridiculous rhythm in her chest. "Can I come in?" "Just for a minute. I brought something for you." Emily stepped aside, allowing him into the small space. In his hands was a worn, leather-bound journal. "I owe you an explanation," Nathan said, his usual confidence replaced by an uncharacteristic hesitancy. "And an apology. I haven't been entirely honest with you, Emily." "About what?" she asked, though a part of her already suspected the answer. Nathan took a deep breath. "About why I keep coming back here." He handed her the journal. "This belonged to my foster mother, the woman who took me in when I was 13 after years in the system. She saved my life in more ways than I can count." Emily opened the journal carefully. Inside were handwritten recipes, notes, and diary entries. The handwriting was neat, but showed signs of aging, the ink faded in places. She turned to a page marked with a faded ribbon and found a familiar recipe, one for the exact type of breakfast sandwich she served at Rise and Shine. "I was in Portland," Nathan continued softly, 12 years old. "Homeless, effectively, though technically I was in foster care. I kept running away. One day I was sitting outside a shelter after being turned away for arriving after hours." Emily's hands began to tremble. "Nathan?" "A girl shared her sandwich with me," he continued, his eyes never leaving Emily's face. "She wrote something on a napkin. 'You still have a future.' I kept that napkin for years until it fell apart. But I never forgot the words, or her face." Emily sank onto a nearby stool, the weight of realization overwhelming her. "It was you, the boy at the shelter." Nathan nodded, emotion making his voice rougher than usual. "I didn't realize it at first. When I found your food truck, something about it felt familiar. The name, the colors. But it was the sandwich that triggered the memory. That exact combination of flavors." He gestured to the journal. "My foster mother recreated it for me after I told her about the girl who'd been kind to me. She wrote down the recipe as I described it." "But how did you know it was me specifically?" Emily asked, still trying to process the improbable connection. "That was almost 20 years ago." "I didn't, not with certainty, until I saw a photo on your Instagram page, you and your mother at a volunteer event in Portland. The timeline matched. The pieces fell into place. Nathan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Emily now recognized as a sign of his nervousness. I should have told you sooner, but I wanted to be sure. And then, I didn't know how to broach the subject without sounding like a stalker or a lunatic. Emily looked down at the journal again, her fingers tracing the faded handwriting. So all this time you've been coming to my food truck because of something that happened when we were kids. A random act of kindness I barely remembered. Not just that, Nathan said quickly. Yes, that's what drew me initially. But I kept coming back because of who you are now, your determination, your generosity, the community you've built around this truck. His voice softened. The way you put your brother's future ahead of your own. The way you remember every customer's name and story. You're extraordinary, Emily, you always were. The sincerity in his voice made something catch in Emily's throat. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Nathan assured her. I just wanted you to know the truth. No more secrets. No more wondering why a billionaire keeps showing up for mediocre coffee. Despite everything, Emily found herself laughing. My coffee is not mediocre. Nathan's smile transformed his face, erasing the carefully constructed corporate mask he typically wore. No, it's actually excellent. Another reason I kept coming back. They stood in the small confines of the food truck, the air between them charged with recognition and possibility. Emily felt as if she was standing on the edge of something momentous, a threshold between her carefully ordered life and something unpredictable but potentially wonderful. So what happens now? She asked. Nathan hesitated, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a familiar manila envelope. First, I'd like you to reconsider this, not as charity, but as an investment in your business, in you. Emily took the envelope, no longer feeling the same resistance she had before. And second, Nathan said, a new determination in his voice, I'd like to take you to dinner, not as Nathan Hayes, CEO, and not because of our past connection, just as a man who would very much like to know more about the remarkable woman who serves the best coffee in Seattle. Emily considered him for a long moment. The boy from the shelter and the billionaire entrepreneur had merged in her mind into one complex, fascinating person, someone with layers she had only begun to uncover. Whatever came next wouldn't be simple or easy, but she suspected it would be worth the complications. I'd like that, she said finally, but on one condition. Name it. Emily smiled, feeling more certain of herself than she had in a long time. You let me choose the restaurant. And you wear jeans, not a suit. Nathan's surprised laugh filled the small space of the food truck. Deal. As they stood there, the morning sun streaming through the window and casting golden light across the worn countertops and familiar equipment, Emily felt the past and present align in a way that finally made sense. The future, their future, whatever form it might take, remained unwritten. But for the first time in years, she found herself eager to turn the page and discover what might come next. Loyal listeners, we hope Emily and Nathan's journey from a chance childhood encounter to a meaningful connection has touched your hearts. To continue this emotional experience, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it by clicking to your left. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give the video a thumbs up. Every day we bring unique stories that explore life's complexities. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. We can't wait to hear from you.